Look out, folks. Billy G is starting to make some moves. We'll talk about the newest addition to the Wild decor, what it means now, what it means going forward as we check in with Locked On Blue Jackets for a trade reaction.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to an emergency Locked On Wild and Locked On Blue Jackets crossover as we talk about the big trade that just went through. David Jiricek for Damon Hunt are the players, but there are a lot of other pieces to this trade as well. Several picks going both sides. But wanted to get some thoughts as to what Jiricek brings to the Minnesota Wild. Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets joining us as we discuss the big trade. And Jay, let's just get right to Jiricek to start it. What does he bring to the ice? What is he most known for? Just give us the David Jiricek 101 for Minnesota Wild fans.
Well, I hope Minnesota Wild fans love power play goals from the point. Because that is probably the thing that he is most known for. I'm gonna come out and say it. The trade in a vacuum is fine. I hate that he was traded just because it feels like so early to give up on such a promising young player. But I understand why it went down the way that it did. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a second. But Jiricek for the Cleveland Monsters has been an excellent defenseman. He, I believe, led all rookies in scoring in his rookie year as an 18-year-old defenseman 2 years ago in the NHL. Ups and downs in the NHL. He really feels like one of those players that's probably a little bit over AHL quality, but is not quite ready to make that jump to the NHL. Unfortunately, I think a lot of what happened was he was overpromised what his role was going to be. He struggled with that, and that's when the relationship really started to sour. But Jiricek as a player, you're going to get that big booming shot from the point on the power play at even strength, whatever. Huge, enormous body. Like 6'5" as an 18-year-old, was big with it as well. Like a lot of the World Junior teams you'd look at and be like, oh, where's Jiricek? There he is. He's the one that's, 3 inches taller than everyone else and is throwing his body around like a maniac. Skating is his weakness. He is not particularly fleet of foot. His backwards skating has been flagged as an issue for a little while now. I don't think it's anything that is irrevocably broken. Like these are things that can be worked on, and I'm assuming that's the first step that the Wild are gonna take is right. Your skating needs to improve. If you want to be an NHL defenseman, we need to get you skating up. But he is offensive. He could be a really, really great two-way defenseman. He's never going to be like the most defensively minded guy in the world, but he does okay. He is, I don't know, I have been really, really high on David Jiricek since before he was even drafted by the Blue Jackets. Like he was second on my board that year, which is why I was thrilled when he dropped all the way to sixth for the Blue Jackets. And it kind of sucks that his tenure with this team is ending so soon. This is, if he hits, the Wild are going to love him if he hits. And I still think it's more, I think it's more likely than not he does hit, but there is an if there,
Yeah, there's always an if and if a player is going to fit, depending on the organization. There are many players who have been higher picks than that, even that have just not panned out. So it's all about going to a system that leads to being able to maximize your talent enough to be able to become an NHLer. Now, some of the things that stood out to me that you said was more of an offensive defenseman with the possibility to become a really, really good two-way defender down the road. Well, the Minnesota Wild have no shortage of players on their roster that are adept at defending. And this is a great opportunity to just pair him when he gets to the NHL level full time, pair him with one of them to help with that learning curve a little bit. In just reading the tea leaves, the size, I think, is the thing that Bill Guerin really coveted here. Is that size as a young player is something that the Wild D-Corps just does not have a ton of. And Jake Middleton is signed for a few more seasons. Jiricek can come in and help replicate that size profile that would be lost there. I'm really intrigued by the shot that you mentioned as well. The heavy shot from the point on the power play or just in general, because that is something that teams seemingly can never have enough of, is just a quality shot, and the ability to generate points and goals from the blue line is something that I'm super intrigued by as well.
It feels almost like a lost art these days, especially on the power play. I feel like there's so much pressure on like getting the puck down low and doing like fancy little twiddly things below the hash marks, but it really is like, keep it simple, stupid. Like, and the Cleveland Monsters had a ton of success when Jiricek was in the lineup on the power play, because he would just hang out at the point. Again, he's enormous, so that helps in terms of just basic physics in terms of a slap shot. He's got a pretty good one-timer, and again, he's never going to be the fastest guy, but he does okay. He was really, really good on the point for the Monsters. The question is, I think, can he translate what he did at the AHL level to the NHL? Is he willing to be more patient in the Wild system than he was in the Blue Jackets system?
Yeah, and the thing that I look at with this Minnesota Wild D-Corps is they've been playing. They're one of the best defensive corps in the NHL so far this year, and they're pretty full at this point. Jonas Brodin is injured right now, but beyond that, they've been pretty healthy. Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin, Jake Middleton, Zach Bogosian. John Merrill has been serviceable this year. Declan Chisholm is another young defenseman that this team has, and of course Brock Faber. That is a pretty crowded group, and so I don't think there's a rush to bring Jiricek to the NHL level right now, which is going to help his development, because you've also got Zeev Buium, who is probably, I'd be shocked if he doesn't make his way to the NHL level by the end of the season. So you throw him into the mix as well. That's a lot of quality defenders on this Minnesota Wild team, and 3-4 years down the road, once everybody gets to the NHL level, all of a sudden having Faber and Jiricek and Buium, that is some nice work. That's some nice work by Billy Guerin to add another piece.
I'm really glad you guys are in the West. I'll say that. I was, and again, I'm sure we'll talk at another time about like the return that the Blue Jackets got. I was really pulling for potential. It was never going to happen. I did have a small little pipe dream about maybe prying Zeev Buium out of Minnesota, but it is what it is. Yeah, and like you said, it's a great environment to isolate him in. I do wonder again what the plan is going to be in terms of his development, because one of the things that I think really soured the relationship with the Blue Jackets was he thinks he's ready for the NHL. His agent thinks he's ready for the NHL. The Columbus coaching and the GM didn't super think he was ready. So I guess it depends on John Hines is coaching the Wild this year. That's the name of the coach, right?
Yep.
Depends on what Hines thinks in terms of where Jiricek is. Is there a place in the lineup for him? I really do think he's a guy that plays better the further up in the lineup he is as well. Like he when he was playing, he played a bunch of preseason with Provorov on the second pairing, and I thought he was perfectly serviceable there. I was really excited for them to potentially pair him with Werenski at some point. Didn't happen. He slipped further and further down the lineup, and he's not a guy, I think, that is a third pairing defenseman, just because I don't think that that's where his strengths lie. He is a guy that you want on, ideally, probably your second power play unit. You don't necessarily want him killing penalties. I don't think he's got the foot speed for that, but you want him to get decent ice time. You want him to learn. He's not going to learn anything, and he's just going to get frustrated and mad playing between 8 and 12 minutes a night, which is what we saw in Columbus. Will he accept a demotion, to quote unquote demotion to the Iowa Wild? I still maintain that sending a young player to the AHL is not a punishment, regardless of what many people on Twitter tell me. But if Jiricek goes down to Iowa and is content to stay there for probably the rest of this season, honestly, unless he comes up to the NHL, and I assume they maybe give him a couple of games just to see what they have in him. If he blows them away at the NHL level, he stays. But like, for my money, the best thing to do with Jiricek right now, stick him in the AHL, let him cook. Don't do what Columbus did with him last year, which was send him down, call him up. Oh, actually, no, I forgot the most important part. He made the team out of training camp. Yamaka Kleinen told him to get an apartment in Columbus, and then they almost immediately started healthy scratching him. More games than not. Sent him down, called him up, sent him down, called him up. Like, they emergency called him up when they were in Seattle. He flew across the country to sit in the press box. They sent him back down. He flew back to Cleveland, didn't get there in time, missed an entire weekend of games at a pivotal point for the Cleveland Monster season. So, like, as long as the Wild can avoid doing that to him, I think it'll probably be fine. But I do want to caution people that, like, I don't know that a lot of the issues, quote unquote issues, of like his off ice attitude, which I take with a grain of salt, you know. This is not going to something that this is not an attitude problem. And again, I use that term in air quotes. It's not going to be fixed by a change of scenery immediately. You know, This is not Jiricek was unhappy in Columbus specifically. This is Jiricek was unhappy with the situation he was in Columbus, which is he's not ready for the NHL, but he thinks he is. And I think moving to the Wild is not going to immediately he's not immediately going to be like, oh, actually, maybe I'm right.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Excuse me. He's not going to immediately turn around and be like, actually, yeah, I will go to the AHL. That is the best thing for me. So, like, grain of salt, all of this is kind of mostly speculation. No one has confirmed or denied, like, anything that this is the problem. But, you know, reading between the lines, that was what went down in Columbus. So it could be that moving him to the Wild and sending him to Iowa is going to have the exact same effect that it had when he was sent to Cleveland in Columbus.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I want to point out one thing that you discussed. Him not being a bottom pairing. I like that because I think then you can kind of speed up the process for him by pairing him with Jonas Brodin, like in a pinch, or Jared Spurgeon in a pinch.
That would be my choice.
Two
Personally,
very responsible
adults.
Yeah.
And then let him go. Like, he played at his best, like, last season when he was playing with Provorov. I think because it allowed Provorov to do some of the things that he was better at, and it also allowed Jiricek an environment to learn in. Putting him on the bottom pairing, giving him 8 minutes a night, and giving him, like, 6 shifts all game, like, that's not it.
No, we don't need to do that.
Pairing with an adult in the top 4. Be aware that he's going to make mistakes. Be aware that he's going to get caught flat-footed. Teaching moments, you know, teach patience with him. If you want him in the NHL, play him in the NHL. If he's not ready, send him down. This is mostly me, like, talking to Bill Guerin and John Hines than, like, the Locked On Wild listeners. But, like, that was my biggest problem, was he sat in the press box for most of this year.
Yeah.
If you think he's not good enough for the NHL, send him down. He's 20 years old. He just turned 21 yesterday, I think. Like, he's still a kid. And that's how I feel about that. So.
Yeah, well, no, I like that because it's a D-core that is playing really, really good hockey right now. So I don't think there's going to be this urgency to get him up unless his play warrants it. And, you know, the situation in Columbus, from kind of what I've observed, is where the Blue Jackets are at. You want to get a look at the young players to see where they're at in their process, because you're in a development phase and you're just trying to kind of figure out where everybody's at in their various journeys. And you go from that to an organization that is in the midst of a playoff push. So there's not going to be this like, well, we got to get him up here unless there's an injury, which, as I mentioned, Jonas Brodin injured right now. So I don't know. We'll see. But I was the Wild were linked to Jiricek for a while, and it just felt like the steam got more and more. It just built up more and more, and now he's in Minnesota. So we'll see how it plays out. But thank you, Jay, for the intel on Jiricek, and we'll have more breakdown of this as the week unfolds. We'll talk about it in tonight's Locked On Wild postcast as well, listeners. So make sure to tune in here this evening for more thoughts and throughout the rest of the week. But David Jiricek on the way to the Minnesota Wild for Damon Hunt. We'll see how he slots into the organization. We'll, of course, keep you covered as we do each and every day right here on Locked On Wild.